from employees and employers and family or friends. The feedback is vague, is overly positive, and this is also another piece of research, accordingly to a recent research done at the state in the United States. There is a misconception. People believe wrongly that boosting self-esteem is going to boost the performance, but this rarely happens. And so it can really become a problem. What the good news is that it's not that we are bad at everything. We do know our personality, so we are quite good in terms of the way we judge our personality traits. And there is another recent study that found that participants had a good self-insight about the personality trait levels, like extraversion, agreeableness, and conscientiousness. Now, I wanted to actually, this study said that we are a bit of a harsher judge of our personality traits compared to what is the reality. But I wanted to introduce, for those of you that doesn't know much about personality traits, I think it's another very interesting topic that says a lot about us. Personality traits, it's something that has been studied for years, but it has been established I would say, in the last 50 years with a number of research and longitudinal studies. So the biggest personality trait that has been going around for many years is the Big Five. More or less, they're very similar one to another, but this is the most famous one. And in this slide that you see, there are different name of different aspects of personality. The biggest personality trait that stays stable across culture and across age is extraversion and introversion. Now, in this specific slide that you see at the moment, I think that is a little bit negative, the way that is portrayed. But it's just to give you an example. People that are extroverts versus people that are introverts, for example, they are more gregarious, they are more assertive, they're more energetic. I mean, we are talking about generalizations here, because we are talking about something that, let's imagine, is two ends of the spectrum. We don't usually have a pure extrovert and a pure introvert in terms of, you know, of this characteristic. And also, excuse me, 1 second only. And also, depends on the context. We can be a little bit more introvert in certain social context and extrovert in other contexts. But this is something I would say that represents an average of who we are. Generally speaking, people become more extrovert when they become older. The explanation has been that perhaps we acquire more social skills when we grow up, and therefore we appreciate more being in contact with other people. However, I don't want to see it in that way, because there are a lot of advantages in both cases, in both different personality traits. An introvert is not necessarily someone that is shy. An introvert is not necessarily someone that is not socially skilled. An introvert is someone that recharge his or her batteries by being on his own. He really enjoys his own company. He needs time on his own, while an extrovert would recharge his battery by being in the middle of the party. An introvert will take time to make a decision. It has an attitude more of observing other people rather than jumping immediately into some type of activity, whereas an extrovert might be more adventurous. So this is the biggest personality trait, and is the most well established that you would find in any different scales of personality traits. But there are other traits like conscientiousness. Here is, you know, you see lack of direction. I'm not sure about that. Openness to experience, agreeableness, and neuroticism. We can see this in a slightly different way, because I think that this chart is much more useful. So if we consider, as I say, the personality trait as extroversion and introversion as two ends of the spectrum, we can see that there are advantages and disadvantages on both of these ends of the spectrum. And obviously we move, we are not have a rigid position. The same thing as you see in this big 5 personality trait. For example, agreeableness, the measure of how we trust other people, we can go from one end being very friendly, very trusting, very compassionate, to the other end being very challenging and detached. And again, I believe that we don't have to form a judgment saying, oh, it's not useful to be challenging and detached. It really depends on the situation. And obviously, we move towards the two ends. It's not that we are rigid, but the personality trait just says what we prefer generally in a neutral environment where we would position ourselves. The same thing happens with neuroticism. So is the predisposition to manage psychological stress or difficult situation or challenging situation. People with very low neuroticism are those people that keep the nerve when they are, let's say, involved in very complex, risky activities. For example, Neil Armstrong was scoring very, very low on neuroticism, and there is this fact that is true that he had only 17 seconds before aborting the landing on the moon, and his heart rate was very, very low. So he was a classic example of someone that you want to be in that situation, very low on neuroticism. Whereas you know, other people might feel more emotional in certain challenging situation. Again, I would refrain from giving a negative judgment, because somebody that, for example, is a little bit more empathetic or you know, higher on neuroticism might communicate some distressing news with more emotion, more pathos, more empathy, and so that might not be a very bad thing. Another personality trait is openness. So the degree of intellectual curiosity and creativity and novelty. again, you know, on one end of the spectrum, there is being very inventive and curious and exploring a different option. But again, these people sometimes are a little bit chaotic. They're not very consistent or persistent. They can get lost in one idea and another idea. Whereas at the end of the spectrum, somebody might be more consistent, cautious, or having a more critical mind and being yeah, simply going at a different pace. And then there is the trait of conscientiousness. Somebody on one end of the spectrum is efficient and organized. Conscientiousness is the tendency to be organized and dependable, or at the other end of the spectrum, easygoing and careless. Again, you know, you don't want somebody who is very meticulous and attached to rules, for example, when you are on holiday. On the other hand, if you have to do a very complex task, you might want to have a perfect PA, for example. So, you know, there are advantage and disadvantage to all of these personality traits. Now, there is a difference in knowing ourselves in our personality and knowing what we like. So provocatively, I'm asking you, generally speaking, do you like coffee? There is a I like this question. I think it's a provocative question because for example, you can say, I love salt and vinegar crisps and I hate cheese. And no one is going to argue that that you are mistaken. However, if you love coffee, you say, I love coffee, you're not credible accordingly to research, because a study earlier this year found that heavy coffee drinkers, so people that drank 3 or more cups of coffee a day, actually they want coffee more than they like it. So it's the implication is that they drink mostly to feed a sort of addiction that they have rather than pleasure. So I think that is worth for you considering and thinking that there is a difference between what we want and what we like. Yeah, there is a different what we want and what we like. And so this all very long preamble is to say that everything I said so far can explain why in January, when we start new things, the diet, joining the gym, learning a new hobby, clean out old items in the house, renovation project, or learning something new, we most of the time are doomed to fail. A typical intention is a dry January followed by what they say a drowning February. So just as an example, people, this is a study with gym membership. So every gym owner knows that by March, the attendance to the gym is down by 70%, which is not a small number. So the thing is that the reality is another very interesting piece of research. We underestimate what we can achieve in 1 year. Sorry, we overestimate what we can achieve in 1 year, and we underestimate what we can achieve in 5 years. And this is another very interesting piece of research. So we usually, if we look back and we look at our intention, is most likely that we were able to achieve most of those in the past 5 years, and is less likely that we achieve everything, all our to-do list that we set up in January, just in the next 12 months. What could be a solution to keep the focus, to keep our intentions alive and well, and reach the goal that we aim for? So I